Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Well, did everybody receive an email yesterday and have an opportunity to take a look at it?
Received, but not a chance to look at it.
Okay. Okay.
My wife had a car accident this weekend and she's okay. But we were dealing with all the insurance and all that other stuff.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, since our last meeting, I think that there's been a struggle. I'll speak for myself, a struggle in how we can best present this information so that it is meaningful. And is anybody getting feedback? Is that me? That's me?
How about we all mute myself? Oh, let's all mute ourselves if we're not talking. How's that?
Okay. Okay, let's hope that feedback is nasty. Okay, good. Anyway, struggling with a format that gets to the topics that we discussed at our first meeting about, where it was just this free flow of ideas of what we think are pieces of information that, again, a NAC leader would need when faced with development in their neighborhood. And trying to fit a format for that. And it's been a struggle. And the latest iteration resulted from my consideration of what is the best format that in the internet that has been created thus far. And it occurred to me that vendors who want to sell stuff, they know how to organize websites. So this latest iteration is an attempt to kind of create a shopper's page for our users. And, and imagine, again, just take a topic where I said understanding zoning. And to me, that would be like you go on Amazon and you want to buy a pair of shoes. That would be, your launching part. And then underneath that, where it talks about in my email, the attachment to my email, I mentioned the first topic would be Oregon land use planning. Well, that would be like going for hiking shoes, and so you could read all about hiking shoes and learn everything you needed to know about hiking shoes. And in this case, about Oregon land use planning, metro, and the city. And then let's say that is not satisfactory enough. You want more detail. So you're like, okay, what kind of hiking boots do you have? Oh, you have waterproof hiking boots. Okay, well, that would be like the link to the section in the land use handbook that talks about the Oregon land use planning program. So that would be your most detailed level of information that we would have available on this webpage. And of course, if that spawns an interest in the entire land use handbook, that's a plus. But in this case, it would just be pointing to the portion of the land use handbook where that talks about the Oregon land use planning program. And that would be at this level I call in-depth. So I've created these 3 levels, general knowledge, mid-level knowledge, and then in-depth knowledge for all of those topical areas. And I thought that was my latest. And I want to know what you guys think of that. Any thoughts? Anybody had a chance to look it over and contemplate?
Gary, I think it makes a lot of sense. The person that I would like to hear from probably first would be Deborah, because she's probably the most recent. Well, she's not a novice anymore. I know that.
At the School of Hard Knocks.
She's probably the most recent person who started out. I'm not saying she was a novice when she started, but I'll say that. I don't mean necessarily that, but she started out as a novice, maybe 2 or novice 3 level, and she's probably now expert 10. I'd be curious how she went through that, and I wouldn't be surprised if the map that the overview map that you drew is probably probably what she did, and then probably filled in a lot of detail along the way. But you know, Deborah's with the Meadow Way Park issue had that, and obviously Heidi and I, well, Heidi especially, not so much I, but Heidi and Joseph, her husband, were at that level of detail when the Cobb property situation occurred. But Deborah's probably the most earliest, soonest memory, if that makes sense. So I'd ask Deborah to do that.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, I was, aware of city documents, development.
Could you turn your volume up a little bit? Yeah, thanks.
But, as you said, certainly not to the extent that, that I am now. And so again, it was, a process of finding out that there was something possible being proposed as a development. So this was like, several months before, and I actually don't know where the information came from, but it was a post on Nextdoor that, oh, hey, this property's for sale and they're proposing this number of lots to be developed on this property. So that was like way before even I think there had been a pre-planning meeting, but that was the only official thing that had happened. And so then it was a process of, okay, what does this mean? And how do we get information about it? And diving deep into the weeds of the comprehensive plan, the development plan, and what's the difference between those two, and just to get information. So, this is a great document the way you've organized it, and I think it's important to have the links. And we did talk about, not training, but providing this information to NAC chairs, and then the suggestion of NAC having, if it's not the chair, having somebody in each NAC that is more familiar with the details. And I think too, even making available people as resources, like Heidi, like myself, not hey, I'm an expert, I can walk you through all this, but here's what our experience was, and what my experience was, and to either be sort of an advisor to a NAC chair, or just somebody who is just learning about things.
I'm not sure if it's my end, but I could understand about one every fifth word that Deb was saying.
It's probably me and my Bluetooth. I'll switch to different headphones or different sounds. Hang on.
So Deb, I know that, excuse me, originally we had all signed, not all, but a lot of us had signed up for different, excuse me, elements that Terry sent out. I know ours was neighborhood meetings, that was Connect, and I were working on that. And I think you were working on when a development is proposed in your NAC. And so utilizing what Terry had mentioned about the general, mid-level, and in-depth, were you able to kind of flesh out some of that in that area that you had taken on? You're muted.
So I,
Good for sound.
oh, okay. Not louder. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I think, this whole, entry level, mid-level, in depth. I think that information is included in here. I think, the entry level. I think it might be a good idea to sort of to take it back a step even further in thinking about it in terms of the sort of how to connect to the internet and access a search engine kind of level of, I want to buy shoes. Oh, I want to buy, getting into the details of all of that. But it's like the sort of, I need to help my grandmother set up her computer and get connected to the internet and do a search for shoes, right? And so I think that step is, this is really information at a basic level that anybody who lives in Beaverton should at least be interested in, not to the, digging down deep into the weeds of development code and all of that, but to have, an article in the city newsletter or, and again, kind of thinking about the experience of, Heidi and the Cobb property or myself in this. I don't have all the answers, but, sort of, this is not a public service announcement, but hey, this is why you should care about this kind of sort of introduction, so that it's not a, even to the point of, oh, I've gotten this notice in the mail as a property owner that about development, that I kind of know what that means ahead of time, just because I'm a resident of the city of Beaverton.
So one of the things that I know when Terry and I were talking about this, and it got kind of, some of the things got reframed. One of them was, and I think Knut and I were working on neighborhood meetings, that may have changed to understanding the NAC's role. So the first thing that I thought about on that 30,000 foot level, that general level, is what the heck is a NAC?
Right.
Because the point of entry into the city website, some people who don't even know what a NAC is, they're going to look into land use first in the search. And they may eventually hit on the NAC resource page, but not necessarily right off the bat. So it's like, what is a NAC? And then what is a NAC not? In other words, a homeowners association, which a lot of people get that mixed up.
Right.
And then go ahead.
And I think that's, a lot of what happens on Nextdoor, right? It's like talking about speed bumps, traffic calming, talking about other things. I find myself, replying to somebody, it's like, actually, this is something that you could take to your NAC, right? And, it's pretty easy on the city website to, go to the NAC page and find out what NAC you live in. But again, yeah, I agree. I don't know, it's a citizen education, I don't know what you call it, public relations. But, even, I know they've spent a lot of time information about, the city charter and what a city manager, the difference in how things used to be to how they're going to be now. And I think this is along the same lines of, just public education of what's a NAC and what can a NAC do and what can a NAC not do.
Well, and especially the amount of clicks. If people are going to click in and just click right on out because they haven't found what they're looking for right off the bat, how can you decrease the number of clicks to get what you want to get to?
Right.
And I think that's where, what is her name? Liz might be a useful asset. Lanny, why don't you talk about who Liz is and what she might be able to do to help us?
Sure. So Liz Craig is our web manager, and I was going to do a consult meeting with her and just ask her based on, take a look at what our NAC resources page looks like. What does she think? What are her recommendations? Show her what recommendations and advice you guys have provided so far, and then see what, where do we go from here from her vantage point. And just, we don't have a very snazzy, for lack of a technical word, type of a website. So, you know, how can we maximize what we do have? And Sharon, to your point, you're right. You know, how do you access information with as few clicks as possible? And how do you think through from the vantage point of the community member accessing the site, of how would they try to navigate, you know, with the terminology that they would use as they're doing a search. And so we just want to make sure that all those things are aligned as can be, as best as we can. So just know that that will be happening in the coming weeks. I thought after this meeting, this would really help kind of gel to be able to show her all of our notes to date.
So we should be looking at keywords for one, and things that are going to help in the search. You know, because I know that I mentioned this to, I think, Terry and Lanny before, but if you go into the main web page, the landing page for the city of Beaverton, and you go just into the search tool, if you put land use handbook in, you will get the condensed 7-page handbook, not the 39-page one, until you get to the NAC resource page, and then you get the fuller. So I was wondering if, as a question to Liz, is there a way to denote that there are 2 references to land use handbook? One is the abridged, one is the fuller.
That's a great question. I'll ask her.
Yeah, and to your point, Sharon, about you know, what is a NAC? I guess I thought that is a great topic that maybe could be covered several places on the city website. You know, obviously, once you get to the NAC page, that would be useful. And I should say, this assumption is that you are already on the NAC page, and this will be a new section. In addition to NAC resources, it'll be called land use and your NAC. So that was that's what I envisioned. If you know, anybody has any other comments about that or organization, I think
that's an assumption.
What's that?
But that's an assumption.
What is?
That you're on the NAC page. If I understood you correctly.
Well, that's where I'm hoping this information will reside as a link. Does that sound right, Lanny? Is that what you envision?
It would, yeah. It would definitely be housed on our page. And I think I just want to be in case. I think one of you mentioned it about, you know, it'd be nice if, like the charter, like some of that information when it was front and center. You know, we had a little bit of the main web page, the city's page at some of the highlights of the when information was going out to the voters, but it's really hard to get onto that page. So I just want to really make sure I'm up front with you guys. What we have the most access to is the neighborhood page, and the NAC resources is where we can, that's our sphere of influence. So that's where I'd love for us to spend our time and attention. It's a lot harder to make recommendations onto other areas of the city's webpage. And so many other people are vying for that very popular real estate.
Well, and maybe a direct question for Liz might be, from that main page, do we have the opportunity to add keywords in the search engine? Because I think that would get to Sharon's point about, if you really know what you want to find, or you're not sure how to get there, maybe a direct keyword link from the city's main page would be helpful. And we could figure out keywords that would help people get there from various, you know, common nomenclature about land use and the neighborhood and NACs and et cetera. So that would be useful if we would have an opportunity to add to our keyword search.
And I don't know if this is a good segue or not, but I think where you guys could all help me out, if you go onto any other jurisdictions, especially, in our state, their web pages of things you've liked, some examples, and you send those my way, that will also be able for me to show her, like, this is the reason why we liked this is because it was really easy to navigate, and just being able to show her some of those examples. So that's how you can help me out. If you were to send me some examples, and I don't know what an appropriate timeline would be, but it would be good to have that before my first meeting with her, so I could send that to her in advance of my meeting, and she would have a chance to take a look at that.
Okay, good. I know you've mentioned that before, and so that's a good reminder.
So I would suggest that, in lieu of a clearer link or information on the homepage of the city website, directing them to the NAC page and other resources there, of using Nextdoor. I mean, I know that Frosty posts the weekly update, right? But even, not everybody subscribes to the newspaper. And just from my perspective, it seems like a lot of people are getting their what's going on in the city from Nextdoor informally. And so utilizing that, having the NAC program, utilize that for that information of what's a NAC and why you should care about what NAC you live in, and
Definitely.
kind of, sort of human interest story, not an official government government bulletin, but just to use Nextdoor as a tool for communicating the information. Just a suggestion.
Well, and one thing, excuse me, one thing that occurred to me when you were speaking, in addition to Nextdoor, is that each neighborhood has its own webpage, Facebook webpage. And maybe to have this information linked on our Facebook webpage would also bring it home to folks when they rely on that city resource. Because
Right.
the thing about Nextdoor is that it's ephemeral. You get a news feed and then it's gone, unless
Right.
you know anything else. I'm not that familiar with the inner workings of Nextdoor, but isn't that true? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also mention two additional marketing tools at your fingertips throughout the year is, the Your City that goes out to every household in the city. It's carrier routed, but we have a neighborhood page. And so, when it's ready to roll out, I think we think of how do we maximize, explaining that and rolling that out. And then the other thing is that, when neighborhoods do use their NAC mailing, we always do add a little bit of information about the NAC and the link and whatnot. And we can definitely update that boilerplate template language to connect the dots and tie us all together. So those are two ongoing marketing tools that we can be maximizing with this information.
Just like transportation, it's got to be multimodal.
Yeah, right. It's a layering process.
Yep.
well, and that's true because people get their information from a variety of vantage points and terminology and nomenclature, and that's why I think having multiple platforms is certainly useful.
The other thing to think about too is once I want to talk about when we get towards where we think we've got it all kind of figured out how we want it to go, we might want to think about having a little bit of a focus group of our own, of getting some volunteers to go through it and figure out, like, how did they navigate it? Did it work? What suggestions do they have? And keep refining it till we feel like we've got it to where we want it to be with that information organization making sense.
Great idea.
Lonnie, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
Yes, Joe.
How does Miles fit into this whole scheme?
Well, he's definitely a resource. He's the NAC coordinator, so he onboards all the NAC leaders as they come on board, and he puts together the training materials, and he knows that it's time for a refresh of the NAC leadership resource material. So this will be a good time to update those materials as well. So he'll be part of this. But this is a little bit, you guys are kind of leading this from the vantage point, kind of tying it into your bylaws of, from the lens of you're coming at it, he comes at it from the staff perspective of how do you make sure, you have all the onboarding and information ready to go. You're coming at it from what does the community need? And you're also kind of breaking it down by there's different stakeholders. And so we're trying to, break it into pieces to maximize the educational efforts. Does that help a little bit? So he's the NAC coordinator,
Right.
he's the staff push out, but you are coming at it from here's what the community needs.
Yeah, okay.
And Joe, I don't think I'm sorry, Sharon, just a quickie. Joe, I don't think I shared my email with you that has the attachment that we're talking about. So if I can figure out how to multitask, I can go ahead and send that to you. Go
Okay.
ahead, Sharon.
All right, thank you.
Oh, I just wanted to speak to something that Deb said, and that is, as far as the NACs are concerned, all of us have varying capacity or varying amounts of information about land use. And I know two of us on here are present and former planning commissioners, and others are, have gone through the roles of trying to deal with the land use issues. To Deb's point, I think as BPI folks, we would probably be the ones that would be the ones, hopefully, that have the most information and most expertise in our individual NAC. And whether that means that it's a roadshow that gets taken to different NACs and partner up with somebody else you feel can support you in making sure that that information is disseminated correctly, might be the best way in which to give that information out at the NAC level. But that's to your point, Deb, that I thought I heard you say. Let me know if I didn't understand it.
Yeah, so, my experience was I was aware of the NAC, but it was, they hosted stuff, right? Like for South Beaverton, it was the summer fair movie in the park. So when this land use thing came up, I went to a NAC meeting and just sat in on a NAC meeting, and then afterwards emailed the chair saying, hey, is the NAC the appropriate avenue for this land use thing? So again, it was like, I didn't know whether it was or not. It was sort of this, okay, if I want to talk to somebody at the city, right, about this further, how do I go about doing that? And is it through the NAC or through someone else? So that's what, and I've lived in Beaverton for 30 plus years. So it's not like I was new to Beaverton, and I was aware of the NAC program, but not aware of again, going back to what can a NAC do and what can a NAC not do.
Yeah. Okay.
I got another question. Lonnie, does the city of Beaverton ever send out a postcard to every household advertising the NACs?
Yes. So the boards and commissions recruitment postcard that goes to every household on the backside, the backside is all about neighborhoods and how to be more involved in the neighborhoods. And it would lead you to this page that is going to walk you through land use in Beaverton.
When was, do you know the last time that happened?
Yeah, last September of 2020.
Okay.
And it would happen again September of 2021 would be the next timeline.
Okay.
And Eric, I have a question for you. I was kind of curious on, with your role on your other board, if you have any other kind of thoughts too of, as you're kind of thinking with your other hat on as we're talking here. So not only are you on the NAC, but it's URAC, right?
Yep, on URAC as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's something, and we do have a couple planning commissioners on URAC as well. But maybe just as a way to disseminate information, is that kind of what you're?
Yeah, I'm just thinking like so you've got, you got that technical another board that has a little bit of some coordination of projects being worked on in Beaverton with that lens through URAC. How does that intersect with this conversation and connecting the dots for the community? And I think what we've always talked about, it all comes down to the basic, like, how do people have a voice effectively, and when do they have their voice? And they have such a small window sometimes to kind of learn it all. So how do we set them up for success? And how do we, in a simplest terms, do this and try to remove barriers? What does that look like? And so I just wonder from your vantage point with URAC and the work you're doing there, if anything stands out that we're just not thinking about, since we're kind of thinking NAC and BCCI. I just knew, and Planning Commission, you also brought that to the table.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say we typically look at things from kind of a different angle. Not as much as, hey, how is this going to affect the people right here, but more how is this going to affect the downtown as a whole? And maybe it's too narrow of a focus. So that's a good thought, but yeah, I don't know. So maybe that's a good thing for me to bring up at our next meeting, is kind of how does this intersect with, because we have a few NACs who would be affected by anything in the downtown area. How does this intersect with people's ability to get information, to be involved in the process? Because ours is more like, hey, here's what the city is doing. Here's what the plans are. What do you guys think about it as the advisory committee, but not what does each neighborhood think about it?
Yeah.
So that's a good, I'll bring that up next meeting.
And I guess I can speak to the material thus far. It doesn't really have a whole lot of comprehensive plan information for the user. So that might be an area where we do want to beef up our links. So, the downtown plan obviously is something that your area would be very interested in, and how do we get there? And I think that's a part of this that hasn't really been very well developed, in my humble opinion.
And just a quick time check here. We're almost at about 10 minutes.
Well, with what we have in hand and the comments are.
Terry, before you move on, so there's a glossary of terms in the land use handbook, right? And I think, like, is comprehensive plan and development code part of that glossary? It's been a while since I've actually looked through it in depth, but again, that speaks to the, getting into land use and all the information on the city website. It's like, okay, what's the difference between the comprehensive plan and the development code, and how do they work together? And so,
and that's a great thought, because it made me remind me of a note that I took at our last planning commission meeting. We had the presentation by Brian Martin that we're going to have tonight at BCCI. And he has a couple of slides in there that I think get right to your point, Deborah. So that might be useful for all of us to think of resources that you've come across maybe from other than the NAC resource page that answer some of these outstanding questions that we're trying to answer through this webpage. So watch this presentation. And Jana Fox had one the other day also. And so I think it's a matter of, again, pulling together some resources that come to us, you know, in different ways. trying to, I guess, being, again, the clearinghouse of a lot of land use information that may come from a variety of sources. There's Steve.
Here's
Well,
Steve Spare.
yes, he's getting ready for the meeting. Any other thoughts about where we need to go from here? Since we have a few minutes left, so we can take our break at 6:15. Where should we go from here?
You know, Terry, I'm just wondering if it makes sense that I know that it was parsed out with different people working on different areas, but I think that it might be a good idea that people can weigh in on the ones that they're not necessarily a part of, because I think more brains are better than
Absolutely.
fewer. I know that just before this meeting, I just threw as much spaghetti on the wall on the one that says understanding the NAC's role. And that's where I started by saying that the general, mid-level, in-depth, the general was what is a NAC, what is not a NAC, defining the 11 NACs, and also weaving in CPOs as well, because those are important. The mid-level, I just threw down, talk about land use proposed in the neighborhood, type 2, 3, 4, with links, listing of proposed development by NAC as a proactive measure so that you can know coming in the pipeline. I know that you can be able to go to the desks in the city and know what's coming. Notices by way of signs mailed and posted, and understanding both. And in-depth is the developer's presentation at the NAC meeting, knowing the difference between the bodies, the deliberative bodies like planning council, the testimony as oral and written, votes in those two things, what's de novo, what's on the record, findings of fact, big one right there, because without findings of fact, you're not hitting the mark. So that's just the spaghetti I just threw just before the meeting.
And maybe that's a useful segue for all members to think about additional items. I came up with a couple more myself, and I won't belabor them, but maybe if everybody would go ahead and take a look at and add more. And I think the cross tabs that you're talking about are very useful, because you know, the NAC person may go right to the NAC section and skip over the general zoning information. And so I think having multiple links makes it stronger.
Multiple links and multiple brains.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, shall we say that we've had a successful meeting and give ourselves a break, a pat on the back, and see you in 20 minutes? Or are there any other thoughts? Okay. Well, let's take a break and we'll see you at 6:30. And hopefully everybody will go ahead and take their materials and sketch some ideas, maybe let's say maybe in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks from now. Does that sound possible? Okay, just email them to me. All right, thank you. I appreciate everybody's time, and we'll see you in a few minutes.
So Lanny,
And
just
just
for
to help-
clarification, the meeting's staying open, right? There's not a new meeting?
Well, that's just what I was going to mention. I have to stop the recording on this, and I don't know, if for some reason the meeting, you'll use the same link regardless.
Okay.
If for some reason I have to end the meeting, just come back using the same link. But I am going to try just to stop the recording and keep the link open.
Okay.
Okay. So we
Fingers
should
crossed.
just turn our stuff off.
Yeah, yeah.
Lonnie, can you send me the link, please?